Hi everyone, Teddy Baldassarre with TeddyBaldassarre.com. In this video, we're looking at a watch from Orient, a dive watch from their catalog, looking at this particular variant that looks like the Neptune, but is not technically the Neptune. So we'll get into all the details in this video. If you're not familiar with this channel, this is where we cover watches available for purchase on our website at TeddyBaldassarre.com, a full authorized dealer of all the brands that we carry. So we'll go through the details of this watch. If you have any further questions though, link in the description down below to the product page where you can see more information, can purchase the watch, as well as actually book some time with a dedicated watch specialist from our team. But guys, let's jump into the video, take a closer look at this watch. So Orient has positioned itself among the best value in terms of affordable mechanical watches on the market today. I think many people though, when considering the brand, probably think of two different categories that the brand does well. One would be their dress watches with the Orient Bambinos and things of that sort. And then you also have to look at their many dive watches that are really occupying that entry-level range and doing a fantastic job at that. You could look at the Kamasus, the Kanos, the Makos, the Rays. All of these watches represent incredible value when you're talking about mechanical watches in this range. But as you start getting a little bit higher up into Orient catalog, you start looking at things like the Neptune and Triton. But today we're going to be looking at another dive watch that unfortunately doesn't really have a cool name or just association tied to it, simply just given a long reference number. But I'm just going to call it kind of this rehash, this mini Neptune, as it takes a lot of those design characteristics, slims down the case profile, and brings down the price a bit as well. Now, taking a look at this piece on the wrist, we have a stainless steel case that measures 43.4 millimeters in diameter, 51 millimeters from the lug to lug, and 12.8 millimeters thick. Now, these case dimensions and measurements are familiar within Orient's diver collection, as they're very close to that of the Orient Neptune, which measures an identical 43.4 millimeters in diameter, but a little bit thicker at 13.6 millimeter in height. This difference in height is actually going to be pretty well noticed when you strap this one on the wrist comparison to the Neptune, so that is one good point going for it. Definitely going to get back to where these differences lie as we get into the dial, as well as the movement, as well as just the general approach of this watch as we kind of go throughout this video. The case is a combination of brush finishes applied to the top surfaces of the case and then transitions to a polished finish to the sides. There is some slight beveling of the edge of the case to give the finishing a bit of a harder break, but there are areas, particularly around the angular crown guards, where the finish just blend into each other a bit more. A similar finishing style is applied to the 22mm oyster style 3-link bracelet, in which brush is applied to the interior surface of the bracelet, and then sides of the links are polished. The bracelet is fitted with a stamp folding buckle and security clasp with a 2-button release for unlocking. The finishing on the clasp is not as nice as that of the case, particularly when you're talking about the transition between the brush and polished surfaces. There are 4 points of micro adjustment though inside to allow the clasp to have some on-the-fly type of adjustment, at least with the help of a small spring bar tool. But typically when you're dealing with watches of this price range, bracelet clasps are typically not the best of the best. Moving back to the case and taking a look at the 4 o'clock position of the crown, very similar to that of the Orient Neptune and Triton. Now this one is going to be situated between crown guards and also is going to be of the screw down variety, featuring the Orient logo etched into the polished top surface. Vertical knurling provides good grip to engage and operate the crown, which operates in the expected manner. First position, when unscrewed, will operate the hand winding of the watch. Then at the second position, you can change the date. Then also at that furthest pulled out point, you could of course adjust the time, and this is a hacking hand winding movement. So hacking stopping the second hand when you apply the crown to that farthest position. When the crown is fully tightened to the case, it helps aid this watch with its 200 meters of water resistance. The unidirectional bezel rotates with 120 click. It's easy to engage given the large deep grooves along the edge of the bezel. When you are rotating it, the clicks feel smooth, also providing a lot of tactile feedback and response, with no real reverse lateral play, and the markers line up properly with that of the dial, making it a really nice bezel for this price point. I also find that the bezel action is a little bit better than that you'll find with the Kamasu as an example. The lettering on the black aluminum insert is also rather bold, which is going to help with legibility. Seated inside the bezel is a flat, scratch-resistant sapphire crystal, placing it alongside models like the Neptune and Kamasu, which also feature the sapphire glass, rather than the mineral crystals found on things like the Mako 2 and the Kano. Now beneath the crystal, we find a matte black dial with a really fine texture to it, which is invisible when looking at it with the naked eye, but as you get closer, you then could get a better view of it. The dial layout is very similar to that of the Neptune, and overall has a very familiar classic dive design language. Applied hour markers make their way around the dial, with subtle tapered rectangular markers at the quarter hours, the 3, 6, and 9, a triangular index at the 12 o'clock complete with the lume pip, and then we have round markers for the remaining hours. The handset is a combination of attributes from the Neptune Triton as well as the Komatsu with the large, broad hour hand, and you also have a longer sword-style minute hand with a pointed tip red second hand that will cast around the outside perimeter of the dial. At the 6 o'clock, we have the writing of water resistant 20 bars, so that is going to be the only thing featured there. And then pretty minimal text featured at the 12 o'clock with the Orient logo printed with the writing of automatic just beneath it. At the 4 o'clock position, we have a date window that is going to lack any sort of outline. It's featuring white background with black printing. And just to mark one of the key differentiating factors between this one and say the Neptune, where you're gonna have to pay a bit more money, is that this is not a JIS compliant dive watch. So you're not gonna see that marking of the diver's stamp at the 6 o'clock position that you'll find in the Neptune. Also, what you're going to be missing here too is that power reserve. This is a bit more of a traditional 3-hand layout type of dive watch aesthetic. So just kind of keep that in mind. Also, another differentiating factor will be as we transition over to the back of the watch and start discussing the movement. Now, like every Orient watch on the market, they're producing their own calibers of movements inside of their watches and doing it with some incredible value in the process. Now, when we're looking at this particular watch, we're looking at the caliber, the F6722. This is the traditional 3-hand display with a date for this movement. Now this movement is going to operate pretty traditional beat rate of 21,600 vibrations per hour or 3 hertz, coming with a 40-hour power reserve. This movement is also rated with hacking and hand windings. That can't be said about most watches in this price range. Also, from a range of deviation on these movements, much better than the competition in the price range, almost half of that of many of the Seiko entry-level calibers, this one being -15 to +25 seconds a day in accuracy. Now, just to get back to the comparison to that of the Orient Neptune and talking about what is the difference here between this movement and the movement inside of the Neptune? Now, the Neptune is going to feature one of their more premium level of calibers that's also going to be featuring things like their Orient Star line. That is going to be the caliber, the 40N FA. That's also a hacking hand winding movement. But in terms of what you're getting from Orient, I find these movements to be very solid, very reliable. And the fact that they're making these within their own factories is pretty impressive considering the price here. All right, so now to unpack, looking at this Orient Mini Neptune, or whatever we want to call this thing. I'll let you guys decide what you want to call this watch, because the reference number is certainly not the best thing to go for because it is a mouthful. But in terms of what is going for this watch, I think you have a lot of the pros that people would look for in a dive watch under $500. Sapphire crystal, good dial quality, good lume. You're also getting a pretty solid movement as well on the inside. That is an in-house movement, which many brands cannot say in this price range. But when you're looking at the difficulty of this watch, it really comes down to the other things that Orient are offering. It's a bit challenging to know where this one sits. Just above it, you have the Orient Neptune collection, which are going to be your JIS compliant dive watches, true professional dive watches. And then for a little bit less money with something like the Komatsu and the Kano, you're getting a lot of the characteristics that you ultimately are getting here. So quite frankly, it's a bit difficult to know where to put this watch. In terms of what it's going for in a design perspective, I think it's a better looking watch. It doesn't have as much maybe going on as the Neptune, but that comes with sacrifices that I think the reason why you go for the Neptune is for those professional level specifications. Now, is this going to be a workable diver for many people out there? Absolutely. 200 meters of water resistance, it's completely overkill for most people out there. So in reality, the best way to kind of position this watch is kind of a slimmer Neptune at a little bit cheaper price, also getting a bit more of a clean dial aesthetic, but that also comes with the caveat of, in that case, you might just go for the Komatsu instead anyway. So this is just a model that almost is a casualty of Orient's own success in some of its other lines. So no question a good dive watch and one to consider, but unfortunately, a lot of the other dive watches that should be considered are also from Orient. All right, guys, well, thank you again so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Also, if you're in the market for any watch covered on this channel, we are a full authorized dealer of over 30 brands. All the watches covered on this channel, we are a seller of, so definitely check that out, TeddyBaldassarre.com. Quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support, also offer price match. So if you see one of our watches for cheaper at another authorized dealer, fill out the form on the website and we'll be in touch with you. And then also 9 out of every $10 that we generate goes right back into the content we're creating here, as well as on our main channel, of course. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.